Let's see. What is it, June? Is this Padnug? I don't know. Woo! Boom. I believe we have someone named Jason Grigsby going to speak tonight. What do y'all think about that? Woo! Jason, remember one of those times when we were first chatting? I said I did Microsoft development. You said you do open source?
Yeah.
Who's the biggest open source committer nowadays?
Microsoft.
Ah, Microsoft.
Yes.
That's awesome. And you ran my second favorite user group for years, the Portland Mobile. I love that group. Thank you very much for coming out and gracing us with your presence.
Thank
it's
you.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. So, I'm emphasizing the YouTube here. Why am I doing that? Well, several of you probably know our friend Mike Alder. He comes out here pretty regularly. He almost always will join us at the after party. Jason, you've talked to Mike before.
Yep.
He's a great guy. He's got over 300 people subscribed to his personal channel. Why does Padnug only have 80 people? Come on, folks. Hanselman's on our thing. Grigsby's going to be there late after tonight. I want everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And by the way, James is putting a lot of time and effort into making those videos for us, so we want some traffic. Woo! He was at .NET Fringe today, enjoying himself, and had to drag his poor little butt out here to record this for us. That is a nice guy.
It's not so little, by the way.
I'm not looking to check, so. If anyone somehow has missed the number for logging into Wi-Fi, there it is. No watching streaming video because we're trying to stream out. Don't stream in. I've been told Intel has huge pipes that probably could deal with it, but I don't want to mess with it. Going twice, 3 times. So we have reasons for our existence. Microsoft is obviously a big part of it since everything we do is about being a Microsoft user group. Intel provides a space for us every month. Darren's not here to accept the applause, but go ahead. You might watch it on video. And SureWeb provides space on the internet for us. We have folks who provide giveaways to us. Tonight, I think we have JetBrains, Nonas, and Thirsty Lion tonight. I don't have any plural items, but we have all those. And thank you very much, Andrew, but we also have some Regal gift cards to give away, too. I have been going to Regal. I know some people are going to be shocked, but the new RPX theater, it's almost like the first time I went to San Antonio. It's like, that's nice. Those electric recliners, that's cool. Yeah, right? We have people who help pay for pizza, some of our swag, etc. Here's a few of them. Do we have someone from New Relic who would like to speak? I think I've seen someone. There you go, Matt.
Hey guys, my name is Matt. I'm part of the recruiting team at New Relic in Portland. And the current roles we have open is we are looking for 2 lead software engineers with core CLR experience, as well as we'll be opening a lead QA position here in the next couple of weeks. So if anybody's interested, come chat with me.
We know someone. Anyway, Silence, how about that, Eric?
Yeah.
I hear you. Oh, there you go.
Got QA manual testers, 2 QA automation SDET positions, C# developer, and a security architect, all in Portland positions right now. So not growing quite as fast as we were last year, but still looking for people.
Yeah, folks, that's not as fast as last year. All that. Vanderhouen. Andrew?
I won't do it, so.
Tyler? Tyler? Come on.
What?
Come on, Tyler. Do it. And feel free to share anything else you want to.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, straight. Tyler, Andrew, Dorcas here from Vanderhouen. We're local staffing firm, been here for 30 years. Coming this, what? We started up? Yep. I don't know, sometime in this year. Yeah, tons of opportunities here with Vanderhouen. You're gonna elephant me. Friday's actually my last day. I'm going corporate, so I might be coming back as something else.
Boy, he sat down fast after that, didn't he?
We'll be in the afterwards and yeah.
So since he won't be here next month, we'll be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Who said I'm not gonna be here next month?
I'll talk about it.
I'm gonna wear a different shirt.
We won't recognize you, will we?
Oh, no.
No.
I cut him off.
So, interestingly,
Sponsor.
Craig and I had a conversation about what we were going to do. Some of you may have heard that SureID is not looking for as many developers as they once were. That said, Craig, you had some thoughts on what you might want to share all the same.
Yeah, you may have heard through the grapevine, SureID had a fairly significant reduction in force about 3 weeks ago due to the loss of one of our large contracts. It's good. We lost 25 or 27 combination of engineers, QA, SDET. So if anybody's looking for people, I would love to give you the names of some of those folks who are currently looking for work. Just grab me afterwards. I can put you in touch with, excuse me, put you in touch with a fellow who started up kind of an alumnus group. We can broadcast your positions out to those people.
Excellent. I really appreciate that, Craig. Thank you. Tech systems.
Okay.
What? Okay.
We work with over 100 clients here locally, looking for everything. We're a lot of database stuff right now. It seems to be the thing. ETL. But yeah, I'll be at Thirsty Lion afterwards. Love to buy you a drink, get to know you.
Not everybody, though. Just
Many people that would like one drink, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're here to help anybody. SureID is somebody that we partner with as well, you know, trying as hard as we can to just get to know everybody, so that's what we do.
Thanks, Danielle. IT motives. I don't know if anyone may. That's shocking.
You want me to do an impression?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's a good idea. I don't think we should do that. So it turns out, I think Angelo actually was at Fringe today. So and he's keeping himself kind of busy. So he was not able to make it out here. I'm sure that's probably affected a few other people's decision today too. Robert Half.
Hey everybody, I'm Ryan. I'm the division director with Robert Half Technology. We are the oldest and largest specialized staffing firm in the world, so we've got a pretty large footprint here. Always looking for great developers. A lot of DevOps stuff going on right now with us. My colleagues Steven and Michael are with me. We'll all be at Thirsty Lion. So if anybody is looking to kind of venture into a new role, let us know. We'd love to introduce ourselves, buy you a drink.
Cool. Wow. I think we're going to cover everybody yet. Anyway, Home Depot. Do we have anyone from Quote Center here today? No. I'm pretty sure they're hiring. I'm pretty sure I've seen that recently. They are still hiring too. So keep an eye out on that one.
They definitely are.
Good. Good to hear. Who said that? Okay. Well, there you go. Robert Half knows. Upcoming. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be at Xamarin Dev Days this Saturday. Anyone else? Yeah. That's going to be a good time. I'm excited about that. If I wasn't doing web stuff, I'd probably be doing Xamarin right now. Squawk, anyone do the quality group? They want to speak to what's going on? Because I don't know. Fair enough. June 20th is the West Side Geek Dinner. May 17th, that is not right, obviously. That is, I think it's actually June 21st, I think, for the PortlandMobile.net Developers Group. I thought I edited those and I missed one. Also on June 21st, Agile PDX. June 27th, Geek Dinner Downtown. Jason, you've been there. It's not so bad, right?
No, it's great.
Yeah. Portland SQL Server User Group on the 29th. Tim, you want to put a plug in?
Yeah, so unfortunately just posted it last night, so that's why it's not on your slide yet. We're talking SQL automation at the SQL Server User Group.
Cool.
And we have a brand new meeting location down at Pacific Health Source down in Tiger.
Wow, okay.
So much
Cool.
bigger facility than we had before, and we've got some really cool presentations coming up.
Were you still at SQLsoft?
What's that?
Were you still at SQLsoft before?
No, SQLsoft closed down here about 6 months ago, so we've
Okay.
been kind of playing the wandering location for a little bit. Now we got a permanent place to go.
Cool, awesome, congratulations on that. Portland TypeScript on the 27th.
We don't know. We'll announce something soon.
Okay.
Uh,
That's a ways away. I'm not too stressed about
So
it.
mobile.net is the 21st, by the way.
Okay, so yeah, good guess on my part, I guess. July 11th, we have Amazon, AWS guys, architects coming to show us. It was funny because in my company, someone was posting about, Todd, was it you? Wherever you went? Were you posting about that? Was it your post or were you answering?
It was my post.
They're talking about what you asked for. Exactly that. Lambda's on AWS. So that'll be fun. Then August 1st, our good old buddy Dave Harrison, love that guy. He's bringing Donovan Brand and Jim Calder down for another DevOps presentation. I know we're a little more developer, not DevOps, but I hear rumor that Donovan Brand's kind of the Hanselman of DevOps world, so this sounds like it's going to be worth it. He is presenting in Europe this week, this same presentation too, so to a much bigger audience unless we really work hard. So, before I mention the afterwards, I've been trying to get Charlie to come out. We want to raise your hand, Charlie, and just call attention to yourself for just 1 second. You're not an actual sponsor, so you got to be somewhat quiet. But I've been telling him to come out for a long time, and I told him I'd give him something extra special if he came out.
Oh, easy. Jesus Christ.
So, he's with a place called Catapult Recruiting. He used to be with Vanderhouen, these guys. So, you can feel free to ask Andrew his opinions. But yeah, Charlie, thanks for coming out and visiting with us tonight.
Thank you.
It's been a while since we've seen you out here.
Yeah.
But I brought this especially for you.
Did he get you drunk before you did that?
Use a good reference.
No, wait, hey, I got this really. No, I'm pretty sober right now. Fairly. Not entirely not sober. I mean, totally sober. I mean, yeah. Okay, so afterwards, who all's going to join us over at Thirsty Lion tonight? Wow. Is this Danielle's fault? Okay. You just caught all that on video about, okay. Anyway. Okay, so I'll give a call over and maybe increase our reservation. If anyone, I see a few new faces. If you don't know, you basically go back up Cornell when you see Macy's, start turning. They're over in there, kind of near the PF Chang's over there. So, with no further ado, Jason, come on down. You switching?
Is the mic on? Hey, it is, and it's loud. It's kind of echoey. Let's see if I can do something about that. Is that better? A little better, maybe? All right. Let's see. Just 1 second here. Mirror should not be displayed. Mirror. All right. Is that going to be? That's really. Yeah. Is there any way to control the volume on that, or is it just? I have no idea. Does anyone know? What's this do? That is just a timer. Rich, where did Rich go? Rich disappeared. Doesn't go any lower without taking a button off. Try one more thing here. Mic volume. Is that better? Hey, that sounds better, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Hello, hello. Just gonna keep going down. Is that better? All right, excellent. So thank you all. I have a little bit of housekeeping to do before I start. Just briefly, I'm going to be tweeting while I talk at Griggs_talks. If you want to follow along, all the tweets will be hashtagged with padnug. My normal Twitter handle is just @Griggs. The slides are already up, so don't worry about it because I've got a ton of material. I think I've got 180 slides to go through in like 50 minutes, so I'm going to go really fast. And we are Portland-based, so our company is Cloud4, and I only bring that up because we have the first open device testing lab. Like, we started it here in Portland, and now it's all over the world. If you go to opendevicelab.com, you can see that there are device labs all across the world. We have one in Portland. It's downtown. It's on First and Pine. It's in our office. Nice like space where you can come test on devices. You can go to our site and see the devices that we have available and schedule time. So I just wanted to get that out of the way in case you weren't aware of it. People know that that's the case. All right, so have you heard the hype around progressive web apps? Well, if you haven't, don't worry, because you're not going to be able to miss it for long. The tech press is all over it. They're writing articles about how Google and others are plotting the revenge of the web app, or how progressive web apps promise to upend native mobile applications. I guess because I'm here and there's a revenge out, like I'm part of some sort of secret cabal to take over the web, and so be careful at the after party. And now we don't have to worry about native anymore. It's all just going to be web, as Tim Berners-Lee always intended it. Or do native mobile apps finally have one foot in the grave? This is still a little too much. Bring it down just a smidge more. Which is really funny because it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about whether the web was dead. But don't worry, right? Because Wired updated this article and they talked about how the web isn't dead after all. As a matter of fact, Google saved it. Thank you, Google. And you can probably guess how they saved it. Progressive web apps. See, the tech press loves any opportunity to sort of have a cage match between native developers and mobile web developers to sort of have people combined. I forgot to check. Do we have audio? Totally forgot. We do have an audio. Let's see if that works. We'll find out in a moment. It's going out through HDMI. Do you know by chance? Or yeah, I'm sorry. Should switch it. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, if it's an HDMI, it should come up as well.
Okay. It should be going out through the. It didn't go out that time though. So that will work, you think? Did not make the sound. Okay, excellent. I bring that up because there's actually some videos in a moment that I want to show you, and if we don't have sound, the videos aren't going to work very well. So I'm actually really frustrated with all of these conversations sort of pitting native developers against mobile developers. So I'm going to take a deep breath and sort of realize that we're actually pretty early on Gartner's hype cycle. We're probably about here when it comes to looking at progressive web apps. And if we don't sort of set expectations correctly, what we're going to end up with is that trough, or that curve down to the trough of disillusionment, is going to be much more like falling off a cliff than the sort of nice roller coaster that it looks like there. The hype also can be a bit of a turnoff. This is very much what happened to me the first time I started looking at progressive web apps. Is I was looking at the technology set related to progressive web apps and thinking, why is this different in any way than what we think of as web best practices? And it was only when I was on a panel and I was asked a question, and for some reason I decided to talk about progressive web apps. And all of a sudden I got a bunch of follow-up questions from people. And these weren't technical people. They were people who were decision makers, marketing people who were suddenly interested in what was going on. A bunch of questions afterwards that I realized that sort of having a label around progressive web apps, around that technology, makes a big difference in people getting excited about it. As a matter of fact, responsive web design in many ways was nothing but a label around a bunch of already existing bits of technology. Media queries and those other pieces were all there before Ethan Marcotte wrote his article. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cut through all of that hype. I'm going to talk about what progressive web apps are, why they matter, why they make sense for most applications and most websites, and then talk a bit about some of the challenges and sort of pieces that people run into as they start doing progressive web apps, and then talk a bit about how you can put together a roadmap for a progressive web app. So first, what is a progressive web app? So progressive web app is a term coined by Francis Berryman and Alex Russell to describe a series of technology that previously was only available to native applications. There's a whole list of them, but the 4 that I think are the most important, the list is actually even longer than this, but the 4 that I think are the most important is nearly instantaneous loading applications. The ability to have something that feels that fluid and fast. Having the ability to have stuff offline, push notifications, and then having an icon on the home screen, sort of having that app-like experience. I want to show you this quick video from Forbes that sort of demonstrates the way that they're thinking about progressive web applications and the way that they see that changing their business, because I think it does a good job of sort of describing the potential here.
With the instant access of the web, there's no place that I can't reach. The impact of the web on the newsroom was monumental. It's now relevant either. This is important to me. You really have to start to build from scratch what is a story on the phone. With a progressive web app, there's a link, tap it, install it with no friction. The PWA is on their phone, done. And once that is installed, we are able to alert you to, hey, we got some information for you. If you're interested in whatever areas that you are, you can install that subject or topic, and we're going to serve you the content that you want. And that's going to change our business in a big way. The technology has enabled us to make our new PWA faster than our current mobile site. We're now able to deliver visuals faster, and if you can start to deliver visuals faster, then you can start to change the formats you do. People are willing to stay longer. If they stay longer, they see more advertising. The PWA is going to result in more personalization. Personalization will yield more invention. The web has made me realize there's an audience out there. There's an audience that's knowledgeable, and there's an audience that needs to be understood.
So that's a pretty good sort of descriptor of why organizations are looking at it. To look at some specific examples, Flipkart was an early progressive web app. They're an Indian-based e-commerce company. What's interesting about them is that they actually stopped doing mobile web entirely. They decided to try to push everybody to their native applications. And they did that for a few months until they realized that like their revenue was taking a hit. So they decided to build a progressive web app. And as you can see, it feels very fluid. It looks just like a native application. They're making their way through the application. And then if you want, you can actually take the phone offline. And if you continue to access the application, you can see the pages that you've been to previously. They saw tremendous success from this. Some other examples, this is an example, Guardian's Rio Run. I had to record this in an emulator, so you'll notice a mouse. But one of the things that they're doing here is they're actually using, they're basically building an experience that we typically wouldn't think of. So it was done for the Olympics that were in Brazil, and you can resume from wherever you left off. And it plays music. It tracks your run along the route that you're on. You get certain awards as you hit certain points in the race, and it describes what's going on. And one of the things you can do is you can come back to the application. As a matter of fact, you can come back to the application even if you're offline. So in this situation, I've gone offline. I've returned to the application. It's still retained all the ability to interact with the application. So I can resume exactly from where I left off. And probably most famously, recently, Twitter launched a progressive web app. They're seeing it's much faster than it was previously. And actually, they've announced a bunch of statistics that I don't have in here, but they're seeing an increase in engagement, increase in tweets, a bunch of their metrics are much better on the progressive web app than they were previously. So because progressive web apps are web best practices, browsers are providing incentives for organizations to build progressive web apps. The biggest incentive is that if you've got a progressive web app and it adheres to a certain level of, like it's fast enough and a bunch of other things, they'll ask if people want to add it to the home screen. They'll do a prompt to add things to the home screen. The hope is that over time they'll develop better heuristics about when people are actually engaged with sites, when somebody's more likely to install an application. And it's interesting, like that's the assumption they have, and it wasn't really clear whether this would be true or not, whether they would find that people were more likely to install things to the home screen than they had with, add to home screen banners on native applications. But Alex Russell, who has written, he was the person who coined responsive or progressive web apps, who also works for Google. He says that Google has seen progressive web app banners, add to home screen banners, converting 5 to 6 times more than what we see with native install banners. And part of the reason for that is that the process of actually adding to home screen is instantaneous. As a matter of fact, with a progressive web app, part of what makes it progressive is that when you visit a site, the very first time you visit it, the progressive web app is installed behind the scenes. So adding it to home screen really isn't anything more than just adding a bookmark to the home screen. All of the functionality exists even if somebody never adds it to their home screen. Google's also done a bunch of work to start integrating progressive web apps more closely and deeply into Android. So when you add it to home screen, they're actually behind the scenes wrapping it in a web APK so that it'll be in settings, it'll be in the drawers, the things that you expect from a regular application. The fact that it's an APK also probably means that it'll end up in Google Play at some point, although they're not announcing that yet. Coming soon, app stores. Right, I was mentioning Google Play. Microsoft has actually announced that progressive web apps will be in the Microsoft Store, and there are 2 ways to get into the Microsoft Store. One is by active submission. You create a progressive web app and you submit it. They're also going to use Bing's search engine to identify progressive web apps and simply add them to the Microsoft Store. There are also search engine benefits. Alex Russell once, when he wrote an article about progressive web app discoverability and how there's a lot of stuff that we haven't seen yet, he wrote about how he could foresee that Bing might actually badge progressive web apps in search results. And he used it as a hypothetical because he said, I don't know anything about what Microsoft's going to do. But lo and behold, actually Microsoft announced at Build last month that they are going to do this, that sometime later this summer or fall, Bing search results will actually highlight progressive web apps. The thing that's notable about Alex pointing out that Microsoft might do this is that Alex, while he doesn't know anything about Microsoft, he does work for another pretty major search company. So it seems pretty likely that Google may be entertaining bringing progressive web apps into search engines. But even if the browsers didn't do any of that, I would argue that progressive web apps simply make sense. And they make sense, like I said, regardless of what browsers do, and they make sense regardless of what organizations do with their native applications. So I'm going to talk about 6 reasons that I think they make sense, that I think even a native app developer could agree with. The first is that not every customer or potential customer will install your native application. This may seem like duh, of course, right? But sometimes we have to restate the obvious. When I've been talking to organizations about progressive web apps, oftentimes they'll say, well, why would I need a progressive web app? We already have a native application. And my response is that there's a percentage of your customers who don't have your native application, right? Or have your native application installed, but are on a device where they don't have access to that native application. Maybe they're on desktop or some other device. And 100% of your potential customers do not have a native application installed. Right? So all of those are good potentials for providing a better user experience through a progressive web app. Plus, there are cracks in the App Store. Right? We know that there are over 2 million apps on iOS and Android. Standing out in that mix is really difficult. Plus, install rates for applications has been decreasing. Right? The average user installs 0 apps per month. So actually being able to, first you've got to stand out in the App Store, and then you have to have people install it. And then once you get it installed, it doesn't mean that they're going to continue to use it. The data here is actually pretty damning as well. The average app loses 77% of its daily active users within 3 days after install. Within 30 days, it's lost 90% of daily active users. Within 90 days, it's over 95%. These are Android statistics, so iOS may be better, but it's still a pretty daunting thing. So it becomes much harder to stand out in the App Store. The cost of acquisition is much higher. And mobile web audiences are 3 times as large and growing twice as fast as app audiences. Now, this isn't to say that people shouldn't do native applications. It's just to say that if you're a business or an organization, you're advising other businesses, it probably makes sense to hedge your bets a little bit and make sure that the experience on web is as good as possible. All right, the second statement. You should provide a secure site or app for your customers, right? Like, this makes sense if you're an e-commerce company and you're worried about those guys, or generally you're worried about those people, or just, like, we should encrypt all the things, right? And plus, when you start using HTTPS, like, that is one of the bare minimum requirements for a progressive web app. It so happens that when you do that, you get access to things that are nice browser features that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. For example, the ability to do HTTP2, a faster version of HTTP, or to do simple stuff like geolocation, which we can no longer do over non-secure protocols. HTTPS, or geolocation now requires HTTPS. A bunch of new features of the browser require HTTPS. Third, you should provide a fast experience for your users. Like, we know from multitudes of examples that having a faster experience means higher conversion rates, means more revenue for organizations. There's a ton of data in that. And progressive web apps are one of the best ways to actually provide that fast, nearly instantaneous experience. The Washington Post built a progressive web app. Their website previously, like the year before they did their PWA, it had been 13 seconds to load on mobile. They had gotten it down to 3.3 seconds. And now that they're doing a progressive web app, it takes less than a second to load. Right? At less than a second, you've reached the point of human perception where people feel like it's instantaneous. Right? Like, they don't feel like it's, like 0.10 seconds is like the ultimate point to hit, 100 milliseconds. But at 1 second, people feel like it's responding in a way that makes them continue in the flow without any interruption of their cognitive processes. So this is a great goal to hit. And the way this works is through a bit of technology called service workers. So as you start looking at progressive web apps, there's going to be a lot of discussions about service workers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today because primarily what I want to do is sort of lay the arguments about progressive web apps and how you should think about them and some of the challenges you have. There are a lot of really good materials, both from Google and from others, describing what service workers do and how to implement them. But at their core, what a service worker does is it's kind of like a proxy server that you implement in JavaScript that it can intercept any requests that would go out to the network. And you can decide, hey, should I check the network first and then use a cache version fallback? Should I get stuff from the cache first and maybe use a network fallback? If I know that I'm offline, should I just go get stuff from the cache? And you can specify what stuff should be cached and attempt to have it cached for as long as possible. So all of that is possible with service workers. But the fourth thing, your customers would benefit from an offline experience. Like, not always, not all applications, not all sites, but a lot of them would benefit from an offline experience. And the thing here is that service workers are key to providing that offline experience. The same technology that makes it fast, because you cache a bunch of stuff offline and it doesn't have to download everything with every new page view, is the same thing that will allow you to have something that's available offline. Fifth thing, customers might benefit from push notifications. This is something available in progressive web apps. So on Android devices, soon on Windows phones, and maybe eventually on iOS, who knows, you're able to have push notifications come from your website. So if, say you're eBay, right? There are a bunch of eBay developers here in Portland. If you had a mobile website and people came in via search, right, and you wanted to say, hey, receive a push notification 5 minutes before the auction ends. Right now what they have to do is go find the native application, install the native application, give permission to the application, go find that auction again, and subscribe for notifications. Versus what you could do now with the progressive web app, which is basically search result, the person's looking at the page, would you like a notification? Easy. The sixth thing, you could create a text file, right? Some icons. Because all that's left is a JSON file that's a manifest file that basically declares what the scope of the progressive web app is, where the icons are, like what it should be called. Really simple stuff. See, I think that every step on the path to progressive web app makes sense on its own. And that's part of the reason why I think that we're going to see a lot of organizations start adopting this technology very quickly. Like, I think that this is the first bit of technology I've seen since responsive web design where I think we're going to see companies start investing in this technology. And part of it is that the early returns on progressive web apps are incredibly promising. So Conga sees that it's 92% data load for their initial load versus their native application. They're seeing tremendous speed increases compared to what they see on native. Extra Electronics, 12% increase in click-through rate, 100% more sales from users arriving via push, 4% increase in user engagement. 5 miles, 50% decrease in bounce rate, 30% better conversion for users who come from add to home screen. All the cabs, I really like this example. This was just announced last month. They're seeing a 68% increase in mobile traffic. They see a higher conversion rate in some cities with progressive web apps. And 20% of the users that they're seeing now using the progressive web app are actually people who had previously uninstalled their application. Right? These are customers that were previously lost to them, and now they're getting them back by having a progressive web app. At Cloud4, we've started a site called pwastats.com, where we maintain a list and keep track of success examples from progressive web apps. Lots of good stuff in there. So anytime there's new stuff, and they're also on Twitter, pwastats is the Twitter account. You can follow along. Usually about this point, people are like, okay, progressive web apps sound cool, but iOS doesn't support progressive web apps. Well, that's not entirely true. Progressive web apps work fine on iOS. The progressive part of progressive web apps references progressive enhancement, which is the idea that you provide a baseline experience and then you test for the capabilities of the device. And if the device has enough capability, you're able to provide them with that enhanced experience. So progressive web apps work fine on iOS devices. They just won't necessarily get all the features of a progressive web app. And the reality is that even if we didn't work on iOS, like billions of people use browsers that support PWA features or will support PWA features. And Safari has hinted at supporting service workers, which, to be honest, is the most critical piece of a progressive web app. Once Safari supports service workers, if they don't do push notifications or the other things, it'll suck, but it won't be as big a deal. And there's pretty good hints that they're going to work on service workers. Here's the thing, though. Even those sites, the sites that have started implementing progressive web apps, are actually seeing increases in conversion and usage on iOS. Solid Express is seeing a 104% increase for new users across all browsers, 82% increase in iOS conversion. The Washington Post, which has had a lot of success with their progressive web app, I reached out to them because they noted that they had seen a 5x increase in user engagement. And so I asked their product manager, is that only for Android, or are you seeing it on iOS as well? And they said that there's minimal difference. And I think that the reason why is because performance matters. And in the process of making a progressive web app, you spend a lot of time actually working on the performance of your site, of your application. And so it's faster even on iOS. In many ways, I think that progressive web apps are a Trojan horse for performance. Like, the reality is that if we just built fast sites, that we wouldn't see the sorts of increases in conversion that these organizations have. Like, there would be some incremental increase due to things being engaged and push notifications and things of that nature. But the biggest boon comes from actually building things that are just lightning fast. If you're going to work on progressive web apps, there's a tool called Lighthouse that you can use to check how your site matches up to progressive web apps. Very soon, actually in the next version of Chrome, this will be integrated in the developer tools. So if you go to the DevTools tab, you'll be able to see Lighthouse, and it does a bunch of audits, including performance-based audits. So, and at some point, it's very likely that browsers will start to pay attention to performance metrics in terms of providing things like higher search rankings and maybe including stuff in store. Like that'll be one of the signals that they use to identify a good progressive web app. So as I said, progressive web apps simply make sense because not every customer will have your application installed. You should provide a secure site. They provide a fast experience. Be nice to have things offline. Might be nice to do push notifications, and doing a JSON manifest file is pretty simple. But simply making sense and being simple design are two different things. There are a bunch of what I think of as unanswered questions from the earliest days of mobile, particularly as it pertains to the web, that when we start looking at progressive web apps, we start revisiting. So if we go back and we look at design back right after the iPhone came out, everything was designed to ape native conventions, in particular to ape sort of the way that iPhone OS looked. This is WP Touch. It's a WordPress plugin that allows, or a WordPress theme that allows for a mobile site. And that's what it looked like back in 2008, 2009. This is what it looks like now. Right? The web has sort of evolved its own design language. It doesn't feel like iOS. It doesn't feel like Android. It doesn't feel like Windows. It's some sort of combination thereof. Owen Campbell Moore, who works for Google, product manager, works on PWAs, has written this great article about what it means to have something that feels great from a progressive web app. And he started by saying that forget everything you know about conventional web design and instead imagine you're designing a native application. Just like, what? Like, forget everything we learned. He goes on to say that it's important to pay attention to what native apps have created as expectations for people, sort of what they expect when something is installed on their screen to avoid creating a jarring experience. And so this goes back to these sort of questions that I think have been going around since the earliest days of the iPhone, which is what makes something an app? And how do users' expectations change when they consider something to be an app? And I bring this up because there are experience and development considerations that come up when you start looking at a progressive web app, depending on how you answer these two questions. So I'm going to get into like some more detailed looks at sort of how those questions manifest as you start working through a progressive web app. And then I'm going to go into some stuff that's like, just like you have to do this right. The first is how much do you map to the particular platform, right? Like, do you make it feel like iOS and material design? This is what Owen suggests. Like, you should have the fonts match up. You should have it ape all of the conventions of those platforms. But then, like, how many platforms do you adapt to? And what do we do about desktop? We don't assume that it needs to feel like a Windows application on Windows or a Mac application on Mac. And do we jump every time the platform changes? Microsoft just released Fluent Design, really cool design system at Build. You should check it out. It's really neat. I don't want to change the things that I build every time Apple or Google or whoever decides to change what something looks like. So I think that when we look at our applications, we need to resist the temptation to feel exactly like native applications and ape everything that native applications do, but instead make sure that what we do feels right for whatever the business is that we're building stuff for. What impact does it have when we go Chromeless? So when you do a progressive web app, in your manifest, you can declare a display mode. Display browser, display standalone, display full screen. And as you move to each one of these, you lose stuff, right? So in this case, we've still got the navigation bar and we've still got the status bar, but we've lost the URL. We've lost tabs. We've lost the menu. We move to full screen, we lose all that, plus we've also lost the back button. Now, in case you don't use an Android device, I just want to point out that it is possible to reload a page by pulling down and to swipe up from the bottom to get a menu and a back button and a home button. But as you can see on the right there, depending on what the background looks like, it may not be easy for somebody to actually see those controls. They may not know that they exist. I think we are spoiled by browsers, those of us who work on the web. Like, we don't think about all the affordances that browsers give us. So in the warm comforts of the browser, like I said, we've got the status bar, we've got the address bar, we've got the navigation bar. But also within the menu, we've got things like information about the page. What's the certificate on it? How secure is it? The ability to download things, tabs, downloads, find and page. Even at least on Android, under sharing, you've got the ability to print and to email, right? As we move to progressive web apps, we actually lose some of that functionality. We have to bring that functionality with us. So I like to think of this as like roughing it in app land. Because once we get rid of the warm comforts of the browser, we have to start giving consideration to stuff that we haven't had to worry about. Just simply like the back button is harder than people think. Because oftentimes when we build stuff on the web, so what you'll see in this, this is a Polymer example of a shopping cart. And you'll see sort of like we go through a home page, and then we go to a series of products, and then we look at an individual product, and then we bounce back up to the category level, and then we bounce down to a particular product. That assumes a hierarchy, right? This idea of sort of like going down to a product detail and then pogo sticking up to a category level and then going down to a detail level. That isn't the way that we experience the web necessarily. Like we search for something and we get a search result and we go directly deep link into the middle of a site. And then our expectation is that we can sort of jump all over that site in a non-linear fashion. Which means that when we start adding things, right? For example, this is that same Polymer site, but on desktop. And I haven't gone anywhere previously. Like I went directly in, like maybe I've gone from a search results. Where does that button go? And does it do the same thing as that browser back button? They don't in this case. Actually, the browser back button goes back to the previous page. That button in the page, even though it looks very similar, goes up one in the navigation hierarchy. So when we make the decision to move to full screen, right, which I can tell you as somebody who's been talking to potential clients, they want to go full screen, right? As you go full screen, there's a whole bunch of implied functionality that you have to build that you may not be thinking about. Now, I do want to point out that there's one sort of nice thing. There's a new media query that allows us to detect what display mode something is in. You can also do this detection in JavaScript, so you can make a decision about whether or not it's in full screen and maybe show the back button only then and not show it otherwise. We need to remember that not every customer or potential customer will add the progressive web app to their home screen, right? So it may not make sense to have things like the back button and the sort of assumptions we make having it full screen. As a matter of fact, I think that there's a good chance that a lot of people won't add them to the home screen, that people are kind of tired of being prompted to add apps. But here's the great thing. Your progressive web app will be installed to every visitor who visits your site, even if they don't add it to your home screen. Because adding it to the home screen is like the last act, right? All those interactions, whether it's push notifications or offline, all those features are available long before they add it to the home screen. All right, so another thing we need to consider, if you get rid of the URL bar or the address bar, what happens for social media, right? Like, there's nothing to share. Are we going to get back to like adding in all these icons in our work and like supporting all these different interfaces? It seems pretty crazy, especially when we know that only 2 out of 1,000 mobile users actually tap on in-page share buttons. It's pretty daunting. If your business is built around sharing, like if that's a critical thing, you probably need to be pretty careful as you make this transition. Maybe it doesn't make sense to go full screen, right? Maybe having the URL is important. Also, there's an experimental API, the Web Share API, which hopefully will allow us to implement share buttons that actually use those native controls. So inside a web page, we can actually have a share button that if somebody does it, it will actually bring up the same sorts of controls that somebody is used to seeing, where they can share it or they can save it. They get the same sort of native UI. Another sort of question is this idea of app shell. So Google is really promoting app shells as a way to provide really performant design. So an app shell is essentially like you've got the shell of your application and you want to store all of that offline, and then only the content gets downloaded as somebody navigates through the application. The reason this matters is that the perception of speed is much more important than the actual speed. So a lot of the metrics that browsers, browser makers are looking at, the developer relations are looking at, is no longer about how long it takes for a page to load. It's things like, when is the first paint to the screen? When is the first content full? What is the time to interactive? When can somebody interact with this web page? And when you make those things faster, even if it takes more time to actually download the whole experience, people will feel like it's a faster experience. And App Shell is a key part to make this happen. I did a bunch of research into why the Washington Post site was seeing similar increases on iOS as they were on Android. And I think it has a lot to do with the performance and App Shell. So in this video, I've got, the Washington Post was really great because they actually ran side by side their normal version and their PWA version, so you could opt into one or the other. So it allowed me to actually test differences between them. So on the left, I've got one that's got no PWA, no App Shell, and 4G connection. The one on the right is a 4G connection with the App Shell. And I'm describing this video ahead of time because it goes actually pretty quickly. What to watch for on the right is that the navigation bar, sort of the menu bar Washington Post, stays there throughout the loading experience. On the left, it goes away. But the left's page, actually, if you watch sort of the loading indicator, actually completes before the one on the right. But the one on the right will feel faster. All right, you ready? Everybody? Here we go. See? So having App Shell actually makes those experiences feel faster, even though they're not necessarily overall faster. App Shell isn't without controversy. Jeremy Keith has written about how it's used as a get out of jail free card. People say that they can't do progressive enhancement because they're building an App Shell / a single page application. In talking to organizations about moving to progressive web apps, App Shell is oftentimes a really big undertaking, right? It requires re-architecting your site or your application so that everything is, being pulled in by Ajax, but also any random URL needs to be deliverable, right? So it can be a big re-architecture. But you don't have to do it, right? Jake Archibald, who works for the Chrome team, has said that we need to change the perception that progressive web apps equal single-page applications. Our site is a progressive web app. It is not a single-page application. SitePoint has a good article about retrofitting a website to be a progressive web app. And at Build, when Microsoft's Edge team was talking about progressive web apps, they consistently put up on the screen something that said progressive web app, and then they cross out app and put site, just to make it clear that it doesn't have to be an app, whatever we think of as being an app. I also think it's a question as to what should be made into a progressive web app, right? Facebook on desktop is one application, but when we move to mobile, it's a series of applications, right? Like Facebook and Messenger and events and pages and groups and moments, and then all these other ones that I don't even know what they do, but there are a ton of different applications, right? As we start looking at making progressive web apps, what makes sense? If we're lucky, we'll be like Browser Sync, where the whole site is simple enough that the whole site makes sense as a progressive web app. Or maybe it'll be like Yahoo, where their apps, and these aren't progressive web apps, but their native applications actually map incredibly well to subdomains. So they've got finance.yahoo.com, and that could be, that right there is they've got a finance Yahoo app, and that could also be their progressive web app. I've also liked this idea of tearaway apps. So Nest has a site with a bunch of different things inside of it. But if you sign in, basically what you get is the ability to control your thermostat, right? That's what a lot of people want to do with their Nest site. That's an experience that makes sense. It so happens that that experience is incredibly, incredibly similar to what their native application looks like. As a matter of fact, it's so similar that I suspect that their native application is just a wrapper around their website. I'm not 100% certain. But I think that there are going to be businesses who have a whole site, but then there's one piece that somebody may want on their phone. Right? The ability to just tear away, sort of like a poster with the tear away thing that you take with you. So these 4 questions: how much does your design match the platform? What impact does growing Chrome risk Go have on the UX? Whether you should app shell or not app shell, and what part of your site should be made into a PWA. All of these have implications both from an experience perspective and a scope perspective. If you start looking at a progressive web app, how long is it going to take to actually build out that? If somebody decides that they're going to do app shell, that's a much bigger undertaking than if they don't. And these get back to these key questions of what makes something an app and how do users' expectations change when they consider something to be an app. All right, I'm going to change focus slightly here and talk about some details that we have to get right when we build progressive web apps. The first is that we have to decide on a caching and offline strategy. What are we going to do here? So a good example of this, like just from doing performance and having an offline fallback, comes from English Accent Maps. This application, you can browse around, you can look at various areas, and then they'll provide a video that provides you with that accent, so you can hear what that accent might sound like. I can barely hear it. It's pretty funny, actually. Like, I can't show you, but there's a bunch of really funny accents and videos in there. But if you go offline and you continue to interact with this progressive web app, it'll bring up a thing that says, you seem to be offline. Like, we can't show you videos because they're on YouTube. We can't show you the map because that's Google Maps, right? Like, we don't have access to those things. They also do one more thing where they provide the ability to like save something offline, right? To favorite it to come back to later. But this is sort of the bare minimum of a progressive web app. You're using service workers to cache for performance purposes and to provide an offline fallback if somebody hits a page that you don't have access to. Another sort of common example is what we did for Smashing Magazine, which is they wanted to cache the most recently viewed articles that somebody looked at. So as somebody browses the site, it caches things. And they also had a couple of things that they wanted to cache as well. This is actually what we do. So if you visit our site and then you go offline, if you have been to, first off, we provide an indicator that says you're offline at the moment. If you go to a page that you've been to previously, you see the full experience. You can continue to interact with it. But if you visit a page that you haven't been to, we provide an indicator saying that that's, you're offline. Now, we made a deliberate decision to do this. We were tempted to actually cache all of the top-level pages ahead of time so that it felt very app-like. But most people who come to our site because they want to read our articles, read the things that we're sharing and talking about. And it didn't make a lot of sense for us to preemptively stuff a bunch of stuff on their device, right? That would be unfair. And we actually get a lot of visitors from developing countries who are web developers who are reading about, say, responsive images. Another option is to let people choose what to cache offline. So in this demo that Jake Archibald made, he's got a Wikipedia demo where you can select individual pages to be available offline. Again, this can be done with service workers. You can have individual things. You can provide people with some sort of UI to do this. And then there are instances where it may make sense to basically cache everything ahead of time. Like that provides an indicator that says, hey, it's ready to work offline. It's a small enough application. Let's just go ahead and cache everything up front. And then the person can interact with it. And again, sort of in relations to AppShell, right? Like each one of these decisions will be progressively more time-consuming from an implementation perspective. There's also this idea of accelerated mobile pages. And so accelerated mobile pages are, you've probably seen them in search results. Like there's a little carousel here that's got top stories, and there's a little icon down at the bottom that says AMP with the lightning bolt. And if you click on them, they're incredibly fast to load. That's because they've taken a subset of HTML and really limited what you can do with it. It's actually like its own HTML elements. So if you're doing stuff with AMP, you can actually very quickly move from AMP to a service worker, oops, sorry, one slide too far, you can actually install your progressive web app behind the scenes. So somebody goes from a search result page to an AMP page. Behind the scenes, a service worker gets installed, the whole progressive web app is installed, and then if they proceed to your website, they get that progressive web app experience and they get the really, really fast experience. And there's some great videos online talking about how to do this. It's also really important, yeah,
I
what?
just had a quick question.
Yeah.
It's probably important to know that the caching is not local cache.
Right.
One of the biggest downfalls of when we first started trying to do web apps as native because of
Yeah.
all the things that happen with local cache, but service worker in the caching system is brand new. So
Correct, yeah.
It's important to know the difference.
Yeah, brand new. It's not local storage. It's awesome storage. Service workers. Good point. Push notifications. As people start using push notifications and get access to them, we're seeing a lot of bad behavior. For example, YouTube for a while, like you hit the homepage and YouTube was like, YouTube wants to show you notifications. Do you want to allow it? Like, this is terrible. This is like walking into a room, meeting somebody, and the very first thing you say is, will you marry me, right? Like having that sort of relationship right off the bat doesn't work. Many people are already annoyed by notifications. Right? So even though they're new to the web, we need to make sure that we understand that people already have this expectation of annoyance. So when we're working on it on our site, we're like, people really want to read the stuff that we write. So here's, like an article, and then, at the bottom, hey, if they want to get notifications, we'll provide them with a button. Only then do we go to the browser Chrome to sort of ask them for permission. And then we thank them for subscribing. We also have the ability, just within this same interface, to turn off notifications. And that's really important. I'll talk about it in a second. This is actually very similar to what Twitter Lite does. They do this really, really well. So if you're using Twitter Lite, only when you navigate to the replies, is it replies? I think it's replies. Like it's the tab that sort of shows like replies and people retweeting you and things of that nature. Only then do you get this overlay that says, hey, do you want to turn on notifications? And then if you say yes, then you get the browser prompt. And then they say it's been enabled, and it gives you the ability to go in and customize it further. And all of this is really important because the browsers, Chrome at least so far, has implemented a kill switch. So if somebody is annoyed with the notifications from your progressive web app, they can hit that kill switch, and then you will never be able to send that person a notification ever again. So it's really important to provide people with controls to turn off and turn on notifications. There's a great article, Owen Campbell-Moore, I was mentioning him earlier. He's done a great article about best practices for handling permissions, like notifications, push notification permissions. All right, so if you hit the point where you're like, hey, I want to build a progressive web app, let's put together a plan. This is where it gets kind of exciting for me because I like puns. And I find progressive web apps to be kind of punny in a lot of ways. So progressive web apps are progressive because, of course, they're built on progressive enhancement. If the browser doesn't support these features, nobody ever knows. But if they do, we test and they get a better experience. And they're progressive because they promote a progressive relationship with customers. So as the person interacts with the site, more features sort of happen, right? They get, the first time they visit, it loads normally but fast. But then the second time they get the cache version, so it's even faster. And then if they indicate interest, then they might get the add to home screen, or they get the push notifications, and all of these sorts of things happen. So you can sort of start out with a very low level of engagement with the user and gradually make it more. And progressive web apps are progressive because we can build them on a progressive roadmap. So when we started working on our progressive web app, we knew we wanted to do this, but we also had a redesign we were doing. So the very first thing we did as part of our redesign was make sure that we moved the site to an environment where we could have a certificate, where we could have a secure site. We actually moved to HTTP2 so it would be faster, and we put a manifest in place. Manifests are actually important for anyone on Android. That's actually what people use. That's what Android looks for if you bookmark a website, to know what the icons are. So it makes sense to do a manifest right now, no matter what. Then a couple months later, we added a service worker. So we had faster pages. We were sort of caching some things. We had an offline fallback. And officially, it was a progressive web app at that point in time. But we were still working on stuff. We then did offline pages. And we had an offline indicator. And we improved font loading behavior, which wasn't related to doing a progressive web app, but just was something that we wanted to do because we wanted to make it faster. And then about a month after that, we added push notifications. We also did some additional things with HTTP2 preload to make things load even faster. And then on December 7th, we announced it. Right? We did some small tweaks, and we said, hey, we've actually got a progressive web app. But we didn't stop. We're continuing to do that work. And what's great about this is that every step along the way, we're delivering value for the people who visit our site. We don't have to wait till the end to bundle it up as a binary and submit it to the App Store and wait for that. Like each step makes a difference. Again, each step on the path to progressive web app makes sense on its own. So I started by talking about how the hype around progressive web apps is frustrating. And I found it really frustrating because it's mostly focused on the wrong things. It's focused on native versus web. It's focused on icons on the home screen. And it's not focused on how this actually makes the web like amazing in a way that it hasn't been possible in the past. And it's not just progressive web apps. I just want to show you a couple other things that I think are part of the reason why we're headed towards like a renaissance of web stuff. Credential management API. I'm going to show you this demo. Oh, I forgot it has music. It's got terrible music. Makes no difference. So Credential Management API allows you to store credentials offline, and then as you hit a web page, right, like you can see it automatically sign the person in. So you're able to share credentials, potentially sync them across devices. Sorry, I forgot that it had music. I need to kill the music. But a really, really great thing, right? Like now we can log in and browsers will hook it up to fingerprints. We'll be able to log into sites with our fingerprints, do the same sorts of behavior that people have been doing on native. There's also this thing called the Payment Request API, which allows us to have access to stored payment information. So in this demo, what we're going to see is that as we're checking out, we get a pane that comes up, provides information that's been stored in terms of shipping information, credential information. The person just hits pay, they enter their CVC, and they're done. CVV, and they're done. Like really, really fast. And this is not dissimilar actually to what we're doing with Apple Pay on the web. As a matter of fact, the two standards, Apple's isn't a standard, but those two things are converging. The Payment Request API and Apple Pay on the web are actually going to be just one standard. So you build these all together and you get some really, really amazing stuff. I'm going to show you one last little video here from WeGo, sort of pulling all these pieces together. Everything from AMP to Payment Request API, progressive web apps. I think it does a good job. So we're reaching this point where we can use web technology to provide the sort of experience that we previously never could have dreamt of doing, particularly on a mobile device, something where somebody can come to a site, they can have it load instantaneously, they can have a fluid, frictionless experience, be able to check out things in moments, to use and integrate with things on the device like the payment requests and stored credit cards. And so I actually think that what we're looking at is, like I said, sort of a renaissance period where there's going to be a lot of reinvestment in the web from companies that are looking to take advantage of progressive web apps. And I hope that as you go and talk to the companies that you work for, or the organizations you may consult with, that you encourage them to take a look at progressive web apps. Thank you very much. Yeah, question.
The payment API, is someone taking a cut on that? Like the 30% app tax?
It's not. It wouldn't be that level of stuff. As far as I know, it's just like using stored payment stuff. So like Apple Pay doesn't require, when you're using Apple Pay, it doesn't like to buy stuff on the web. It's not taking a cut there. They're taking cuts like on the other end. So like some credit card companies won't work with Apple Pay, things of that nature. But as far as I understand it, like you as a developer using Apple Pay on the web would not have a cut. Is that correct, Andrew? Do you know, or?
I don't know, actually.
Okay, all right. I thought Andrew might know. It's like his hand raised really quick. Yeah.
Well, so all these stats about how it improves conversion or this and that, is that all explained by performance or speed, or is there something else? Like it seems like there's a process of you have to be more thoughtful about the whole experience when you redesign for this. Maybe there's some.
Yeah. So the question is that, you know, like, is this all related to performance? Are there other pieces of it? I don't think we know definitively. Like my suspicion is that it's primarily related to performance. I think that some of the metrics, like you can see some of the metrics are clearly related to having push notifications, right? Like re-engagement metrics and things of that nature. But one of the things, we've had a couple of organizations come and talk to us about progressive web apps, and their sites will be, you know, like take 12 seconds, sometimes 20 seconds to load on 3G connections, 5 meg downloads, 200 HTTP requests, like just insanely slow sites. And I've told them, like, look, we could make your site a progressive web app by adding a service worker and doing a manifest file, but I don't think you're going to see the conversion increases that are why you're interested in this, without also addressing performance. Right now, on the progressive web app side of things, there isn't a performance like metric that causes a site to be included or not included in sort of search results and, you know, app stores and stuff. But I think it's very likely, and Alex has written about how Google will eventually want to sort of keep raising the sort of barrier to try to make that experience really fast. So all of the indications that I have from conversations with Google's developer team, sort of like what I'm observing, seems to indicate that it's like mostly performance. But I think what happens is that in the process of like trying to figure out, like if you start thinking about what are we going to cache offline, how are we going to use service workers to make a faster experience, then you start like thinking about all the other places too. Like it just puts you in that mindset of dealing with performance issues. So I don't know. I guess the answer is I'm not entirely certain, but if I had my guess, it's performance. Like I guess what I would say is that if you could do nothing else but speed up your site, I would do that. I actually even feel that way about responsive web design, right? Like I think that having a faster site is more important than having a site that conforms to fit mobile form factors. And I say that as somebody who like ran Mobile Portland and like evangelizes mobile and does responsive design work. But like browsers do a pretty good job of, you know, pinch zoom, tap into zoom on desktop sized pages. But like there's no gesture you can use that will make a site faster. Like people just like stick their middle finger up in the air and leave your site if your site's too slow. So, other questions? Yeah. I think yeah.
So I like progressive web apps. I think they're really cool. It reminds me of app store model is kind of like 1994 with CD-ROMs and installing and that kind of thing. And so moving into this direction is definitely the way to go. But I kind of feel like there's two big hurdles. One of them is clearly Apple. You know, they're not going to really back this up. That's going to be really tough to get people to really start using that. And the other is user behavior, because, you know, for instance, like if I ask my wife, you know, go and get this app, she's not going to go to the browser. She's going to go to the App Store. So changing the user's behavior, how do you feel like we can work on?
Okay, so there are a couple pieces in there. The first one is sort of like, so the question is really about challenges related to doing progressive web apps. First one is about Apple's adoption of progressive web apps. I'm of the opinion that it doesn't matter because of the fact that there's such a large market on Android and other platforms that it's sufficient enough to justify on its own, and that in the process of doing things for progressive web apps, like there's enough data points now to say that when organizations take progressive web apps seriously, they end up taking performance seriously, and they're seeing benefits on iOS. That won't necessarily win the argument in every organization, but I think so far in the conversations that I've been having with potential clients, it's been sufficient. I've had conversations with Apple developer relations people. I know that they're very open and interested in service worker, right? I know that they are also very leery of push notifications. They were the very first, or even though they've got push notifications in Safari on desktop, like they're worried about bringing them to iOS. So like from a functionality perspective, it actually would be pretty easy for them to bring it over. I know that they were the first organization to do the ability to add to home screen from a web perspective, so that's always been there. But whether or not they ever do a prompt to add to home screen, I don't know. I don't know that it really matters. The one that matters the most for being successful on iOS is the service worker piece, because that's the one that actually makes the biggest difference. And they seem at least warm, like that's the most commitment you'll get out of Apple. So I'm optimistic about that. I also think that when they start seeing people create really compelling and fast experiences using progressive web apps, that is the most likely thing to cause them to start doing this, right? So as Twitter does this, as other e-commerce retailers are doing this, like I know a lot of them are either like Airbnb's moving to a progressive web app. There's a bunch of different organizations that are making the transition to building progressive web apps because they know that investment will pay off across all platforms except for iOS, and then it's all standard. So if iOS supports it in the future, then great. And if it doesn't, they still have something that works well. So I don't think, and iOS hasn't been a big problem in having conversations, but your organization, the people you talk to may be different. The second part about the behavior piece, I am much less worried about because I think that, again, that's sort of a mistake in thinking about the icon on the home screen as being the objective, right? To me, the objective is we have a bunch of people, a lot of organizations, right? Like, I'm not sure what the numbers are for eBay, but it's probably 50% of their users are like people who come in from the web, not people who have the native applications installed. I know that it's that way for Walmart. Like a lot of organizations have talked about the fact that they've got a top of their funnel that comes in through the web, right? And you want to provide a better experience for the top of the funnel. I actually think that good PWA experiences could mean more native app installations, because somebody starts interacting more and more with your product, with your service, because it's a faster experience. And then eventually they decide that they want, maybe they decide they want the native app. Like, from my perspective, having conversations about trying to change behavior or trying to like fight native applications isn't where I've had the most success in having conversations. Usually I lead with like, this is something you should do to provide a better web experience regardless of what happens for those others. And then sometimes clients will say, well, yeah, we want to do that. And also we're white labeling our service. And so it's a real pain to deal with the App Store. So we just want to move the whole thing this way. But yeah, from my perspective, I'm more focused on like how do we provide a much better experience so that as people come in from search or social or whatever they're coming into, that we're more likely to convert them into customers. And I'm not as worried about converting people like there, that brings a lot of people in. And then like from there, I've got them and I can like ask them if they want to install it to the home screen or if they want to install the native app or whatever we choose to do from there. But we won't lose them immediately. There was a question over here somewhere. Yeah.
The caching of the pages is all pretty neat, and that's good, but obviously it consumes resources on the phone, and the question I have is, what's the default garbage collection on the cached pages? What's that look like?
Yeah.
How can you bump it up so that my pages get cached?
Yeah. That's a great question. Each browser has their own rules on how that's working. And so like, I should probably add it to like the tweets. I wonder if the tweets went out. But like basically you can go and you can see sort of what the limits are. And then if you hit a point where like if somebody hasn't visited your site really recently and they're starting to bump up against the limits of what the browser will cache overall, then your site could bump out of the cache. Like that is entirely possible. If that's the case, then you're just back to where you would be on that first visit, right? If they've added it to home screen, then I believe you get out of that entirely, right? Then the rules are different. If you go, like for example, Microsoft, if you do the Microsoft Store, if somebody installs it via the Microsoft Store, not only does that no longer apply from that limit perspective, but also you get access to, Microsoft has a bunch of APIs that are JavaScript APIs that allow you to access native functionality that you otherwise wouldn't have access to from a web perspective. If they install your application via the Microsoft Store, right, then you can use those features. If they install it via the browser, like search or whatever, then they won't, right? There are different ways that you can install it and have different permissions. One other thing about it is if you have an application that you need more space on, there's actually an API that you can use to trigger a user notification prompt, basically asking the user to give yourself more storage. And in that case, then the browser will recognize the user has taken that action and then prioritize your content accordingly. So it's not a guarantee, but there are enough sort of pieces in the puzzle that I don't think it's as big an issue. And especially right now when there's so few progressive web apps, like I think I've seen every progressive web app created. Like I won't be able to say that a year from now or 2 years from now, right? Like, but right now you can do it and you can be pretty certain that if somebody visits your app that like you're probably not going to get bumped, at least for the foreseeable future. Yeah. There's a question back here. Yeah.
How well does a framework like Ionic help with developing progressive web apps?
So I've not used Ionic. I know that they've written quite a bit about progressive web apps. I think that they were one of the early ones. So based on that, I would guess that they've done some good stuff in that space. But I can't say for certain. I know that like a lot of people, like React is now doing stuff. There's actually a really great video from Google I/O, and Sarah Drasner actually summarized it and some of the links from it on CSS Tricks recently. It was like progressive web apps using JavaScript libraries or production JavaScript. I can't remember exactly what the title is, but Addy from the Google team did it, and he sort of went through like what React has for PWAs, what Vue.js has for PWAs, like a bunch of the different things, so that you and a lot of them are building out that stuff now. So, but the relative merits of them, I don't know. Like all the projects we've ended up doing have been, they're like, we're not starting from scratch. So we haven't had the luxury of like, oh, we're going to pick what framework provides us with the best tooling. We've been what's existing and how do we build around it. So. Other questions? Shall we drink? Well, thank you all very much.